my point is here is how much does quality? Because Rob said earlier about things being quantifiable, and I think, art is definitely not about quantity. That's fundamentally science is about quantity. There's two aspects of experience. One would be quantity, things that are quantifiable, and the other one would be quality. But is there a quality to the 70s Doctor Who's, which...
Well, I think quality changes. If you were to make those 70s programmes now today, people would think that they were bad. But at the time, people probably thought they were amazing because they'd never seen anything like that before.
Is there not people who appreciate the 70s one because they are bad? That's part of the quality of them.
Yeah, but that's appreciating it for a different reason than it was created intentionally or originally.
And this is a very postmodern concept. Can we appreciate art for things that the artist didn't intend?
Yes, maybe.
So how does quality work? What is quality?
You're talking about interpretation, that somebody can interpret something without sort of contradictory to whatever the artist's
and I think
intent is.
That's probably fairly common, isn't it? Especially with music lyrics, for example, that
that people
interpreted
can find something
completely differently to how the person originally intended them to be when they wrote them.
So if art can be appreciated and there's a quality to art that the artist didn't intend, that the viewer or listener has, this undermines the idea of communication again, isn't it? So we've gone. Well, we sort of established that, and that seems quite strong. And then when you actually think about it, using anything, but we've used the Doctor Who as an example straight away. I think if I was going to buy the DVDs, it would be the Tom Baker series. That's what I'd want, regardless of how bad or the production values are and how clunky it is. Are the storylines better? I don't even think they're probably not. The storylines on the new Doctor Who's are probably as good.
Well, I mean, I was saying this before. I mean, I think there's things where, because there's a lot of it is always... I say a lot of it is always, doesn't make sense. There's a lot of it brings back the sort of the villains and creatures like Daleks and Cybermen just keep coming back because they're so sort of ingrained in the culture of the show. My feeling is that any of the new things that they've created tend to be more... obviously they're more modern, so they kind of separate. They sit a little bit apart from the sort of the cheesiness or the silliness, I should say, of the original. Because that was always, I think, it always felt a bit silly. But I don't know if that's my sort of current brain looking back on it now, thinking, well, it's all a bit silly. But at the time, in terms of special effects and stuff like that, but there are new storylines that just tend to seem to be a lot more serious and darker.
There were probably numerous storylines and things that would be considered very cliched by today's standards, but at the time they weren't, because they were new, or the first time that those stories had been told.
Just to go back onto a point that I think we were talking about half an hour ago, but I did find
Is that when you went quiet?
I went back quiet for a while because I was looking for how long it was between as well, because of this sort of, because as Christopher Eccleston started, it was a sort of reboot of sorts, wasn't it? But Sylvester McCoy finished in 1989.
1989.
Yeah, well, I thought it was later than that. Then the Paul McGann sort of TV movie was 96. And then Christopher Eccleston started at 2005. So it isn't really like a continuation, which is why I think it was the idea was to sort of reboot it, really. And
so what you're saying is that Sylvester McCoy had to have a rest before he then went on to ruin Tolkien as well.
I mean, this could be... How long have we got? I mean,
did Sylvester McCoy ruin Tolkien?
Is that a question
he
for...
He didn't ruin it, but he plays a major part. Was the person
who made the decision to put Sylvester McCoy...
Well, he
ruined Tolkien.
He became Doctor Who, and then that disappeared for apparently 15 years. And then they brought him in to do the Tolkien films, and I've downloaded an edit. I was telling you about this. Some fan has edited The Hobbit down into a 4-hour film, And when you watch it, you go, "This is incredible! It's monumental." Once you take all the
all three films into 4 hours.
All the three,
yeah, all 3 films just down to 1 4-hour films, and it's things, you know, like the absolutely awful barrel race, you know, which is just truly awful, which looks like a computer game, except where they cut to those, like they look like what you call those little cameras, you know.
Like GoPro.
Yeah. You know, the GoPro footage. Why even put that in?
Oh, it's in where there's like splashes on the camera.
Adds insult to injury. And what they've done is they just have one little bit, the barrels drop, they have one little stunt from it, which is more feasible. So there's a bit of excitement there, and then it goes on. But the thing that's interesting is Sylvester McCoy is just not in it. Thank God. It's like he's just not in it.
He's not in the Hobbit book, is he?
The character doesn't exist.
He was just brought in to ruin it.
That barrel riding bit, they I can't remember now, but they don't fight orcs on the way out, do they?
Well, the whole point is that they hide inside barrels.
Yeah.
So that they don't get seen.
Yeah.
And then in the film, they get seen.
Yeah.
In which case, what's the point of being in the barrels in the first place? Yeah.
So,
but also, because even Legolas, though, isn't even in...
Lego Legs.
Isn't even... I don't even know where that came from. He's not even in the Hobbit either, is he? But they've just brought him in because... people like Legolas, I guess, for the films.
I like Sylvester
and then that
McCoy.
really bad
I do
smooth...
like him. I think he does. I think he's not the worst Doctor. I think he was a very good choice for a Doctor.
I quite liked him as a Doctor.
Yeah,
and as a wizard in a Tolkien film, he's a very good choice. So if Sylvester McCoy is watching, I think he's very, very good.
This is your disclaimer now.
Yeah,
just
I don't want to upset Sylvester because I do think he's really, really good, and I think he's really good in both films. It's just such a shame that he gets brought in, you know, as the main, to be used to ruin such incredible things. You know, I'm surprised they didn't get him in on the Star Wars and that's something.
Well, give it time. You never know.
Are they not ruined already? Well, I tell you something, because you know, I think this is what we're going to be doing on these podcasts, is talking about stuff like this.
Just stuff.
And I think we've laid the groundwork that we have sort of got an artistic reasoning behind it. But I started watching Andor last night, which I thought...
I haven't started that yet.
You haven't seen it?
No, me neither.
I felt it's really, really good. It's like really good, unlike the Obi-Wan Kenobi one, which, you know, they seem to have...
I liked that, though. But I know what you mean, though. I know, because there's a bit of fan service in there, which I think didn't need to be. I mean, I know we don't need to, because that could be like whole conversations, and they're things that have been talked about in probably a million podcasts. But
the thing is, I think the whole Rogue One, that's the most successful of all the new Star Warsy type things, and it's because it's not Star Wars really. They've created another original idea basically that works.
Well, and The Mandalorian as well.
Yeah, and I think The Mandalorian was successful because they've been able to create their own...
They weren't tied to the stories that already existed.
No. So, you know, and I feel that there does seem to be, at the moment, artistically, definitely, I think it's arguable in music, it's arguable in film, that there seems to be a bit of a crisis, doesn't there, where the audience... almost is undermining what people are trying to do. I think it's like a new thing because of the internet, because of social networking. You know, companies are finding it really difficult to get something out there, and I think there's been a crisis anyway, so they've been trying to create content which is derived from existing content. Doctor Who is an example of that. Star Wars is an example of that. It's happened to Star Trek, and all those have almost been ruined. The sort of memory of all those things have been ruined because the people on the receiving end, as we were saying, have been turning around going, we don't like this.
But the catch-22, I think, is that if you try and do something different but in that style,
it will always be
and so people just go like, well, we've already had, some sci-fi thing with some kind of magical powers. People will just be like, well, this is just like Star Wars, isn't it? So it's like, okay, then. And then so people go, well, do you want another Star Wars film? Okay, we'll make more Star Wars films. And they go, well, it's not the same as... At some point, there's always a catch-22 where, are you ever going to be able to please people? I mean, I'm sure the right people can. I think necessarily part of the problem is the wrong people got put in charge of certain things. I don't want to name names, but maybe that's what it is. But you're right again, because we're in this world where everybody has a viewpoint that can be seen, and then communities grow online of people that go, oh, I don't like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that, oh, I don't like this, I don't like this, and it just snowballs into this sort of ball of critique.
Yeah,
that's my phrase for the day. Ball of critique.
From a sort of commercial point of view, how much money has been made for the media organisations as a whole of people on YouTube trashing, Doctor Who, Tolkien, Star Trek, Star Wars. These. It's interesting that we've rapidly covered these, and we didn't mean to, but I think this is a phenomenon which is really fascinating at the moment. Is that as much as I might agree with some of the stuff on the YouTube videos I've watched, which are trashing Star Wars or whatever it is, the new Star Wars, I also realise that they're doing that because they're getting huge viewing figures, and that anybody putting up the opposite and going, the new Star Wars film's great, is probably not going to get the figures, and so we're living in a world now where the consideration of the audience is immediate and direct. I mean, it's like,
He's one step short of saying fake news. Basically, that's what he's getting at. But that is the thing. That is a sort of cultural shift, I think. Anyway, and not to go too far into the fake news thing, but we know that media is generated because the audience wants to be confirmed on something.
Well, let's tackle the last three Star Wars, right? Those films. They're pretty much. They're $1 billion failure, and I think everybody sees them as a failure. Do you think there's anybody who doesn't? Do you think there's actually? I own them all on DVD, and I will sit down and watch them. I've watched them more than once. Is it the case that as artists, should we be saying, let's just respect the artistic statement that was made by those artists who have got proven track records, that they've made a statement, it's different to what George Lucas did? Should we actually try and understand it within the own bounds of what they're doing in the current culture that we live in? Because there's so many films from the past, like Ghostbusters, which are basically written on the fly, all the things that Star Wars gets accused of being, and they're seen as masterpieces and all this sort of thing. So should we actually culturally step back and go, no, let's actually try and deal with these as artifacts now? They are entertaining. They've got a fan base. It's a minority that are of middle-aged Star Wars fans that were going to react against anything that was made, or is it truly a crisis of art? Because obviously the film industry is one of the biggest art forms out there, and people just don't know how to make films anymore. Which one is it? And I'm really undecided on this one.
First one. I can't remember that was there were two options of what. Yeah, I think that is the key. Coming back to, we said before about whether you make art for yourself or whether you make it for people. I think ultimately, at some point, if you look at the directors, like Rian Johnson, for instance, came in on the second one to do that, and I think, and I have heard him in an interview in a podcast with that Joseph Gordon-Levitt thing, and how he approaches art when he talks about one of the questions I think they were talking about is how much do you bring, how do you be not derivative, but how do you be influenced by something but create something original? And I think those films, I think, is the key to that. And like you've said, maybe it is just a case of we hold things up to the previous, not standard, because in terms of filmmaking, in terms of the cinematography and everything, there is nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with the acting. It's like there is stuff wrong with it. I think partly is that, and it might be my own thoughts as well, is that we like those films so much that we're trying to hold them to the same thing, when actually they should just be considered as something slightly different within the same canon and same universe, but they're different. This is.
We're never going to get any views on this video.
We're not. No.
We've been far too nice to Star Wars at the moment.
I'd be interested to know, because we all as you say, we are viewing Star Wars, having grown up in that first era of those first 3 films, and then the second trilogy. But you two have both got young children, and for them, I imagine this era now of these 3 films is their era of Star Wars. And when they grow up and they're older and they look back, what introduced them to Star Wars will be these most recent 3 films. So how do they?
That's a really
feel
good point, because
about the older films?
Well, the third, I would say the last 3 they're just films, so you can put those on, and my kids will watch that because they're films.
Yeah.
Then the next sell to them is the middle 3.
Yeah.
Because that actually explains the storyline, and a lot of the storyline that I think kids are interested in and the way things play out is in those 3. And actually the first 3 are quite a hard sell for kids when you watch them.
Because as in episode 1, 2 and 3, you mean? Or?
No, episode 3, 4 and 5, you know, the proper Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
I mean,
they're quite a hard sell for kids now to watch, aren't they?
And is that because of the special effects and the way that they were filmed?
Believe it or not, it's the same as Doctor Who. It's the same as Star Trek. It's
they just look at it and go, "This is terrible. What's this?
This is old." And
yeah.
I mean, my daughter really sort of. we watched those in the sort of in order of release before the new ones are out. So we did 4, 5, 6. Well, actually, we did the whole 4, 5, and then 1, 2, 3.
Release order.
No, we did it. But also when it got to. Did we do that actually? I can't. Yeah, I think we did the 4, 5. That order that was online, they call it the machete order, where you watch 4 and 5, then you have the reveal at the end of episode 5, at the end of Empire, and then go back and then watch that backstory and then finish with 6. So we did that.
4, 5, 1,
4,
2,
5,
3,
1, 2, 3, 6. Actually, online people talk about forgetting about episode 1 as well because it gets rid of Jar Jar Binks and other things, but
Did Sylvester McCoy play Jar Jar Binks at all?
Yeah, maybe that's maybe he's the.
Is he the Sylvester McCoy of Star Wars? They never needed him. Sylvester, you're not needed. We don't need you for Star Wars. We've got Jar Jar Binks. We did it with computers.
But when you say about like kids and stuff, it's like my daughter actually really liked Jar Jar Binks because he's just a comic character for at the time when she was 7 years old or whatever, 8 years old watching it. He's a funny character, and again we hold the sort of these newer films, including those prequels, on the sort of, I can't think of what it is, the sort of ethos of those 4, 5, and 6. But like you say, they are heavier films. And originally there was no real comic relief.
And is that also there's an element of nostalgia at play there as well?
Oh, I think so. Yeah,
because those films are our childhood, and. If you never watched those, if you were somebody that's the same age as us, and somehow you never managed to watch Star Wars, and you watch them now, would you think they were any good? Or would you just say they're terrible?
Well, it's like I was watching. You know, I'm a big fan of that guy that does the pitches for films, and when he does Star Wars, he goes. When he describes Obi-Wan Kenobi dying, he says Obi-Wan Kenobi will die, and Luke will be really upset. And the other guy says, "So why wasn't he that upset when he's like?" Parents died. Oh, just ignore that. You know? And they're as ridiculous. You know, the way people. I do think that the way people pick at these new films, they don't pick at these old films, which are equally ridiculous plot wise and don't add up and all that type of stuff. I think
you could get away with that kind of thing though
that era because the audience is they
didn't question as much.
It's like the audience. I think what's coming out of this is the way the audience interacts with art now has completely changed. This is what's coming out of taking these 3 franchises, or Star Trek, Star Wars and Doctor Who, and put them under the microscope. The audience, the way it interacts with art has absolutely changed from me being as a kid. I mean, we went to see Star Wars. Everyone was mad about it. I can remember. 1977, it was on at the cinema. I can remember we would have had to queue for 2 hours to get in. They were showing it, and then they were shuffling the next lot in. And my dad didn't want to go because he knew we'd be stood in a queue. And we came home from school and sat on my dad's car outside until he got ready to watch it. Right? We'd never seen it.
Yeah.
We knew nothing about it.
That was the hype that had been created about this thing, yeah.
And the thing was that what was incredible was I can remember going in and watching it, and it started up, and of course there's that shot that everyone goes on about it. You were sold straight away as soon as that spaceship came over the top of your head and just went on for it. I think my dad went, oh my God.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
And back then you could make something, nobody knew what it was. It was a game changer. The game changeriness of it echoed out into the world, and people would, by word of mouth, would go, oh, you got to see this film, and then the film would live up to it and it would become legendary. Whereas now you can't really not know what you're going to see. They're having it's almost like a crisis of art, and I think the same thing's happening with music. Is obviously you know, nobody actually wants to buy your album anymore. There's so much out there, and people can listen to it and they can make a judgment in 5 minutes. It's not like waiting for the next Michael Jackson album to come out or whatever. And you know, there's
But I think, but also, it isn't just about people being able to make the judgment. It's they can access everybody else's judgment really quick.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because, like, you know, back in the day, but like this is the thing. It's like, you know, unless you were getting, you know, before the internet, it was like you'd have to find a magazine where there'd be a review for something. But I never used to do that, so I just used to go like, oh, I've heard this band. My mate said that this band was pretty good.
You talk about it on the playground.
I'd just go and buy that album. That was it. And not like quite in a playground, but like, and you see, I think it was rare that I'd buy an album that I didn't really like as well. So, and I don't know whether that also plays into it, where it's like I think I'm going to like this album, and I'll buy it, and that in itself is like, well, there's an effort that's gone into this. And
I think as well, certain albums require listening to before you can really appreciate them, and that's something that you would do a lot more because you didn't have that many things to listen to. And once you'd bought that album that you'd saved up for, you couldn't listen to anything else.
No, you'd listen to that. Or,
you literally bought into it.
You sort of learned to... Yeah. But now...
And you can't do that with...
But now people are just like, you know, it's just you could go up and have... I mean, the album... We'll talk about our music at some point as well, but the album, when we put that out a couple of years ago, it was like the amount of reviews that came out really quickly. And it's like, and thankfully, all of them apart from that one particular were pretty good. But it is like that thing of like, well, this bunch of people could have just not liked it, and that could be the thing that just stopped a load of people who would, because they just go, oh, I won't bother with that. Oh, that review's not very good. I won't bother with that. I don't know how powerful that is.